Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for the Greater Manchester Chamber Mayoral Debate. I'm Heather McGrail, the President and CEO of the Greater Manchester Chamber, and we're so happy to have you here today to hear from our two mayoral candidates, Kevin Kavanaugh and Jay Rouet. I'd like to, before we start, just give a round of applause for these incredible candidates who, as we all know, public service is very hard and takes a lot of commitment and time and energy. And so I'd like to acknowledge their efforts to running for office. So just as a reminder, as I know most of you know, but the GMC is a nonpartisan organization, so our role is really to bring the information to you to make sure that you can make informed decisions about the candidates running for office. And that's our goal here today. So I'd like to just make sure that we're setting aside all of our policy differences and different interests in the room and just make sure that we're here in a nice, safe space for a wonderful conversation led by the great Scott Spradling, who always keeps it real somehow. Yes. I'd like to recognize some dignitaries in the room. I see former Mayor Syl Dupuis right here. Thank you, Syl, for all your service. And former Mayor Bob Baines right behind him in the audience. And also very important and dear to our Greater Manchester Chamber are our board of directors. And we have a few that I'd like to recognize here this afternoon. Matt Cookson of Cookson Communications, our chair. Where are you, Matt? Raise your hand. Oh, we're there in the back corner. We have Trini Houghton of Ripple Effect Studio. Trini, over in the back corner. Ted Kitchens of Manchester Boston Regional Airport. There's Ted. Mike Harrington of Harrington and Company. Where are you, Mike? Kate Skuteris of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Kate. And Pon Nidichin of City Year, New Hampshire. Where are you, Pon? There you are. Right next to Syl. Our board of directors are so valuable and really mean the world to us, so thank you all for all that you do for the Greater Manchester Chamber all the time. And our last board member, who I already mentioned, is former Emmy Award-winning reporter, Scott Spradling, who will be moderating today. So thank you, Scott, for all you do. Again. So today's mayoral debate is presented by Bellwether Community Credit Union, and we thank them for their support in helping us to bring this programming to the business community time and time again. Also, sponsors by Eversource is our investing sponsor, and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare is our advocate sponsor for today. I cannot go without mentioning the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, that is an amazing venue partner led by Neil Levesque, and want to thank them for their service as our venue sponsor as well. So a round of applause for all those folks. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Nathan Saller, the president and CEO of Bellwether Community Credit Union, to come up and say a few words. Nathan, oh, I couldn't find you. I'm like, where is Nathan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you coming out today on such a beautiful October afternoon to hear from our two candidates. Bellwether Community Credit Union, very proud to partner with the Chamber for today's program. For over 100 years, we've been helping New Hampshire residents save for the future, build their businesses, buy a first home or a second home, and we're proud to sponsor today's event. One of the things that we talk about at Bellwether Community Credit Union, community is kind of our middle name, and I think all of you would agree that for a strong community, it takes active, engaged, informed citizens and voters. And I appreciate all of you coming out today to hear from our candidates. I know there's a lot of love and concern for the city of Manchester and our communities here, and I think it's super important that we hear the ideas and strategies for the future of our communities. I'd like to thank Kevin Kavanaugh and Jay for coming out today, sharing your ideas, your strategies with us I know both of you have a lot of care and concern for our city and appreciate you coming to spend the afternoon with us. Thank you to the Chamber, incredible Chamber staff. We appreciate what you do for the community and the business community in particular, and thank you for hosting today's event.
Thank you so much, Nathan and Bellwether, for all your support. Now, let's hear from the candidates, what you all came for. Again, thank you for coming. I'm going to now turn it over to Scott Spradling, who is the true director of this show. Scott.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Happy fall. Happy 2023. It's really, really nice to be here. Thank you for turning out and participating in this, what is a very important conversation about where we are today as a city of Manchester and where we are headed. On behalf of the Chamber and Heather, we are honored, deeply honored to be able to facilitate a conversation like this one. I think we've got a bit of a unique moment in time in that our two candidates for mayor, as we're moving forward in the last 19 days of the campaign, but who's counting? It's not lost on me that they are sitting right next to each other as they're getting ready to be introduced. And I think that speaks volumes to the level of character that both of these gentlemen have and to the type of exchanges that I think we'll be able to hear. And so I'm deeply honored to be able to be here for it. Before I bring the gentlemen up, I'll just sort of give you a little bit of background. We'll do 2-minute opening statements for each candidate. We'll do 2-minute closings at the end of it. We've got about 15, 20 questions that were developed through the Chamber, as we traditionally will do for an event like this, reflective of the mission of the Chamber, of where we're trying to go. A lot of the conversations are going to be familiar ones, but I believe that they overlap with the top priorities of the people of Manchester. They'll be covering the major topics, just as we've done here traditionally. Our job is really to, again, help facilitate a conversation. Each candidate will get 1 minute each to answer each question, and if we end up needing to extend it a little bit, or there are some differences of opinion and we want to flush some things out, we'll do it in 30-second increments. Even though I was taught to tell time as a child, I have a lot of help in this department with keeping the candidates on time. My friend Tim is sitting here in the front row, and he's going to play show and tell. He's going to hold up the yellow card when we have 15 seconds before you have to wrap, and then a red card at the wrap. I'll just sort of keep an eye on it. This is not militant. We want you guys to be able to have a good conversation. So with that, and we flipped a coin to decide who was going to speak first and then have last word. So with that, let's get right to the introductions and done alphabetically. Very good friend of mine, good gentleman, good friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Kavanaugh. Ladies and gentlemen, a good friend of mine, a really good guy. Sound familiar? Jay Ruay. Okay, so by the coin flip, we will move to the 2-minute opening statements each. And by coin flip, Mr. Kavanaugh, you have the first 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us, Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for this great facility. And Neil, as always, you're always welcoming and putting this together. And I just want to ask, so does that mean Jay and I, there's a spot right here, we can have a picture on our wall, on the wall maybe by the time we're done here. But no, my name's Kevin Kavanaugh. I was born and raised here in Manchester. And, you know, never thought I'd be running for mayor of Manchester. And I graduated public schools here. Carrie and I raised our 3 kids here. They all went through public schools here as well. And the goal for me, for running for mayor, is to keep our grandkids here. I want them here. And I want that to be welcoming, and the future of Manchester is what's going to keep them here, a good future. You know, there's been so many things going on, and it's just important for us to all realize that there's so many, I mean, the homeless population, and there's so many times that I've ran for office. I always talk about, you know, public safety, public education, housing, and a good paying job. The public education, I am proud to be supported by the Manchester Teachers Union. I graduated, like I said, from high school here. My kids did. And it's so important. As a state senator, we work bipartisanly to have the biggest funding of public education in New Hampshire history. I'm proud of that. And it doesn't take one side or the other to do that. It takes all of us coming together to do that. Public safety, I worked in the city budget as an alderman to increase the complement of police officers we have by 33. I've worked to bring new technology to help protect the police and protect the residents of Manchester. And the first responders we have with the police and fire, they're the boots on the ground. And again, I'm honored to have the endorsements of both those groups in Manchester, because as an alderman and a state senator, I've always had their back. And with that endorsement, I think they're showing that I will do that as the mayor as well. I know there's housing, and we'll talk a lot about that tonight, I'm sure. And I'm getting the red card coming, so I'll wrap it up. But also opportunity, a good paying job like I did. When I started work when I was 19, I want every kid in Manchester to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rouet, 2 minutes.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Scott, for moderating, Kevin for being here, for the Chamber for hosting, and for all you for attending as well. So we've knocked on over 26,000 roughly doors since the beginning of the campaign. And I mention that not to brag or boast, but really to tell you how consistent the message has been that we've received. People deeply love our city. We all deeply love it. We have a great deal of pride and respect in the city of Manchester, but there's an underlying frustration, and a frustration, I think, born out of love for this city and what we could be with a different kind of leadership, one that breaks away from the status quo, particularly on issues like improving our public safety and fixing the homeless crisis. And I feel that same level of pride myself. My family immigrated to Manchester in 1896 from Montreal, and I came to the city in 2006 to work for the mayor at the time. And about 13 years ago, I stopped drinking. I got into recovery, and I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to public service, and that's exactly what I've done. I'm an infantry officer in the National Guard. I went to work for nonprofits where I help people with addiction, mental health, and homelessness issues. And to be successful in these positions, you have to have a vision, you have to have a plan, and you have to execute. You have to bring people together, focus on the mission, focus on results. And I firmly believe that that's how we should be governing here in the city of Manchester. And that's how I've tried to campaign as well. You know, we've been very fortunate. We were endorsed last week by a lifelong Democrat, former Senator Bobby Stephen. We're endorsed by Tim Baines, who supported one of our primary opponents. And we released a community team outreach leaders list in various communities within the city of Manchester, Vietnamese, Hispanic, Latino, Congolese as well. And we've got to be a city that works together, that comes together, and focuses on solving problems. And that's what I bring to the race. So thank you so much again for being here. I appreciate the time and look forward to the next hour.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. So Kevin, Jay, again, the questions came to us from the Board of Directors. Heather McGrail was able to sort of direct and collect these questions that also came from our Government Affairs Committee and from different members sent in. So these questions reflect the interests of the Chamber's membership. So let's start with economic development. And Kevin, I'll start with you first. Helping businesses grow and attracting new companies to the Queen City is a top priority for the Chamber and the Manchester Economic Development Office, and of course benefits the community by creating new jobs and tax revenue. As mayor, what role will you play to encourage economic development activity?
Well, I really think the best thing about the mayor's office, as the mayor, to be the cheerleader for Manchester. And our economic development office is phenomenal. We need to double it anyway. I think it's great, and that's what we'll do in the next budget I put forward. I'll add 2 more people to that because it's phenomenal. When you see what businesses that are opening on Elm Street and all around Manchester, businesses are coming here because they can succeed. People are moving here because they love Manchester. You can look at the economic engine that the Manchester Airport is, and just what it's doing in the past 4 months. Avello coming here and adding 10,000 people coming in and out of Manchester, but 55% of those 10,000 are coming into New Hampshire. That translates into $8,000 of rooms and meals tax that's coming into New Hampshire. And we've got to keep on doing that and expand that. And how can we help the small businesses as well as the economic engines that we have, like the airport? And I'll be, like I said, the biggest cheerleader you can for Manchester.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rouet, as mayor, what role will you play to encourage economic development activity?
Sure. So I think this should be a central focus of any mayor here in the city of Manchester. I think there are a variety of things. I think it starts first with having safe, clean, and inviting streets. When I talk to a lot of business owners, particularly in the downtown area, one of the things that they're worried about is a decrease in foot traffic because of the homeless crisis that we have, or concerns about public safety. So I think it starts there, and then I think it builds from there. What are the kinds of things that you as business owners are looking for? You're looking for an educated workforce. So working with Manchester Community College, which I know Brian's in the audience, and I had the pleasure of touring that earlier this year. So what kinds of things are we doing on workforce development with some of the great schools like St. A's that we have here, and making sure we're developing that workforce. And then in addition to that, affordable housing, making sure that we have enough housing to have the workers, retain the workers, attract the workers that our businesses are going to be looking for. So I think those are just a few of the things that the mayor can really have a strong role in playing in supporting our economic development here in the city.
Well, congratulations to both of you for the topical bingo that you both hit. You nailed most of the issues that we're going to drill into today.
So we done?
Yeah. So I tell you what, let's do a follow-up here, because we will get into the issues of talking about supporting the airport, homelessness, workforce development, education. We'll break those up a little bit, but I'd like to do a follow-up to just get a sense of your understandings collectively about the economic development and some of the hurdles that maybe we face. So the follow-up, and I'll start with you first, Jay. What do you see as the largest hurdles to economic development success in Manchester, and how do you tackle it?
Sure. So again, I think it goes back to some of the things that I mentioned in my first response about public safety and homelessness. Some of the real concerns that I've heard from the businesses that are within the community or businesses outside of the city of Manchester that I've met at various debates who may be looking, or various events that may be looking to come here, is that the perception of Manchester outside of our walls is such that it could scare people from coming in. And I think that we have to change that perception. We have to make sure that people understand that this is an inviting city, that we do have a great deal of promise, that there is a great deal of potential here, and that we can solve these challenges. And I think that's a signaling effect to businesses that when government is working well, that that's a place that they're going to want to be. And I think streamlining some of the permitting processes as well would go a long way towards bringing new businesses here into the community. But I also think just being a cheerleader for the city and talking about a lot of the great things that are going on here. Because look, Manchester is an amazing place. We wouldn't be here if we didn't care and we didn't think that there was a lot of potential here. But I do think there are challenges that we have that we can fix and improve upon.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, what do you see as the hurdles to economic development? What do we do?
Thank you, Scott. And as I will tell you, as 8 years an alderman on Manchester, I'm glad to see people are moving here and businesses are opening here. We're doing something, and we're going to keep on creating more opportunities for business. When I talked to the Economic Development Office, they had a business that was opening here, and they walked them through the whole process. The problems we have is a lot of the minefields you're walking through starting a business, and they walked them right through this. And this is a national chain that came in here and said, this was the easiest place we've ever opened an office. And that says something about the Economic Development Office that we have in Manchester. And, you know, we talk about the rebranding that we have in Manchester, and the interesting numbers to me that you see that came out of that is that the perception of Manchester outside of Manchester is higher than the perception in Manchester. And I think that's promoting ourselves, and that's part of that, is how great Manchester is. And I have to agree with Jay, Manchester is great, and that's why we care so much about it. And, you know, I'm going to be the cheerleader for Manchester. I got you on that one, Jay. But, you know, it means so much to me, because just being from here and being my hometown, it means everything to me to see it succeed and businesses succeed.
I want to set aside homelessness as a topic for the next one, but I want to drill into the public safety conversation. So, Mr. Kavanaugh, I'll start with you and bounce back over to Mr. Rouet. In terms of public safety, what are the things we need to do in order to maybe change the perceptions, like what Jay just talked about, what you're I think hearing as well, but what we need to do to perhaps make the city safer? And let me twist this question a little bit. Do you believe Manchester is a safe city?
Yes, I do. Like any big city, we have challenges, and we have to address those. I can talk about the study we have from 2018 to present. Crime is down 38%, violent crime down 12%. But those numbers are great, but what we need is everyone to feel safe in Manchester. When you're going downtown, when you're dropping your kids off at school or on the rail trails, you have to feel safe. And that's why I'm proud, in my open remarks, to lead the effort to add 33 positions to the police complement. We added the spotter, and that's been hugely successful of solving the crimes, solving the cases of people that are committing those crimes and getting them arrested. And we'll continue that. The training we've increased in Manchester is up to 40 hours of training per year. That's the standard for the state. That's going to be the standard for the country. And we're going to keep on doing that. And part of what I want to do, if something's not working, we're going to change it. If we haven't tried something that's successful, let's amplify it. And that's what I want to do.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rouet, what are your public safety priorities, and do you think Manchester is a safe city?
So I think we can always improve upon it. I think when you compare Manchester to other comparably sized cities, we don't fare as well as some other cities that are of our size. So I think we can always improve, and of course we should always strive to improve upon that here in the city. I think there's several things that we can do. First and foremost, the police officers that we have in this city are heroes, full stop. But I think the city government can provide a better climate in which for them to work. So I think that's two primary things. One, we've got to fix our state's bail laws. And I think the mayor can play a really critical and important role in doing that. From April to December of last year, over 700 people were arrested, released, and rearrested. And they were rearrested for crimes like assault, weapons charges, and unfortunately a murder as well. That should never happen in the state of New Hampshire, and that certainly shouldn't be happening here in the city of Manchester. And in addition to that, I think fixing the homeless crisis is a huge part of this as well. In July, we had the highest number of overdoses that we've had in over 5 years here in the city. So obviously, if people are ingesting drugs and overdosing, somebody is selling that to them. Fixing this problem, I think, will have a reverberating impact throughout our city.
So let's continue on with the homelessness challenge, gentlemen. Mr. Rouet, I'll come to you first. So it's obviously a difficult, complex, a pressing issue here in Manchester. It certainly is a hot topic among members of the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, we're all working to try to address the issue in our own ways. As complicated as it is, can you help the audience understand what your first couple of steps in the direction of that will be? And in this conversation, I'd also like to sort of recognize my friends from Families in Transition. Maria Devlin and her leadership team are here today, and they're doing yeoman's work to try to help in that realm. But what are your steps?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So a couple things first to kind of preface the conversation. We can't tolerate the disorder or dysfunction that we're seeing on the streets, and we also can't tolerate the human suffering that we're seeing either. So when I used to work in this space, we would talk about this like a balloon, right? So like you squeeze one end of the balloon, the other inflates. If you're not dealing with this in a comprehensive manner, you're going to fail. And I think one of the, so for me, that's three different pieces. One, it's strengthening and enforcing the ordinances that we have on the books. So I would include a ban on camping in that as well. And then it's better, more effective communication and coordination and oversight with our community partners that are really doing incredible work in this space. But I think providing them with an overarching vision and helping lead that way, I think would be critically important. And then, of course, housing. Housing is a big piece of this as well, and I'm sure there'll be a part of that where we can delve more deeply into it, but housing is a critical piece to that too. But if you're not addressing some of these other things concurrently, it's going to take years, I think, for us to get to the point where we have enough affordable housing to fully address this, so this has to be done comprehensively.
Thank you, sir. And I will ask about a housing question and your plans for it. So your 2 to 3 steps of what we would need to be doing right now to address the homelessness challenges.
I can give you action from Tuesday night, what we did. I can give you action for almost $4 million that we used from ARPA funding and home funding that we're going to fund. $3 million of that for 187 new affordable housing units in Manchester. $750,000 to fund a women's shelter for 2 to 3 years. 16 beds that are going to be specific for homeless women to give them a safe play and transition into permanent housing. $300,000 that we're going to use for the Manchester Housing and Redevelopment Authority to have landlords and tenants work together to use Section 8 housing. $300,000 to do that. Manchester has made an incredible investment in the last 12 months, at least that. We've hired a homelessness director, an overdose director. The homeless director is bringing all the nonprofits together, a point of contact, so we work together to conquer this problem. Because it's not just the homeless, it's what is that? It's housing, it's drug abuse, and mental illness. And we have to all attack it together. And we always have to remember, though, too, that these are people that someone loves, and we have to do it together. And that's what I'll do, is I've done as an alderman and state senator, work together with people.
So, gentlemen, let's break down a couple of those things, housing, and I want to start with the mental health challenges as it relates to this. To homelessness and substance abuse, obviously, one of the core challenges is mental health. These challenges are rising in many communities, in states, and all around the country. What is your perspective, Mr. Kavanaugh, on how to address that gap? What do we need to be doing that we're not doing now?
Well, just as I said, as an alderman and a state senator, you work together. I think the state, and I have relationships that I've built in the state senate and on the board of aldermen, and I'm going to use those. I've got so many contacts in my phone. It's not introducing myself to someone. It's let's get together and fix this. I've talked to mayors all over the city, or all over the state already, and we're all dealing with this. And there's so many complex. If I had that magic answer and we could fix it tomorrow, maybe I would be on the picture in this wall. You know, who knows? But it's just we have to do it together, and it's such a complex issue. But bringing people together and attacking that, and a lot of that is funding, and we're doing that. Again, part of what we're doing tonight is talking about the future, and I also want to talk about the actions we're taking here in Manchester. I'm proud of that. And just like I always think, if there's one person homeless, it's one too many, and that's what we have to work towards.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rouet?
We need much more, we need much more effective communication and coordination, again, with the people that are doing the outreach in this space. When I've talked to a lot of the nonprofits within this city, one hand doesn't always know what the other hand is doing. And it's allowing people to fall through the gaps. And people are losing connection with people that are doing this work within the city, and we're not breaking the cycle. And so it also comes to the point where we need to strengthen points of maximum vulnerability. So when people are coming out of hospitals, when people are coming out of jails, they have that pivotal choice to make at those moments where they could go back to the life that they've known, or we can break that cycle and get them into a more sustainable future. And we're missing some of these key critical moments. I also think we need to be doing more in our schools for prevention. Because when you look at this, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We have to be doing a lot more for our children who are in our schools that have high ACEs scores, adverse childhood experiences. Because unfortunately, when you have children in schools who have been impacted by this, statistically speaking, they're much more likely to develop an SUD or a mental health crisis in the future. And stopping that early breaks that cycle.
Let's move into affordable housing, and I think we've got two obvious benefits from being able to put more resources and more emphasis into it. One is it starts to talk about helping folks that are maybe lower on the rungs of life to find a place to live with independence. But when it comes to workforce development and trying to bring in young people and fill the job vacancies that are here and are coming, we are starting to see construction, but we clearly have this as a challenge. There's only so much space in Manchester. So, Mr. Rouet, I'll start with you. What do you see as the first few steps of plans to really boost affordable housing for those on that spectrum?
Yes, so thank you. Sure. On this issue, I've talked to a lot of developers and a lot of nonprofits that have been working in the affordable housing development within the city and around the state. And the primary things that they tell me is providing consistency in the regulatory, during the regulatory process, better incentivizing developers to do this work, streamlining the permitting process so that it doesn't take years to go from startup to the point where that key is in the door, and reforming and updating our ordinances. And this is not a process that can take 1, 2, 3, 4 years. It can't wait. This has got to be something that is done as expeditiously as humanly possible.
Thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, your sense on what we can do for affordable housing for those on the entire spectrum of need?
Well, one thing I don't think you can look at one just as affordable housing. I think there's a whole span of affordable housing, workforce housing, and market rate. As well as, we had an event at the Rex, and we talked a lot about homelessness and affordable housing. And I was at an event the next night, and there were two couples there, they were in their 70s. And they talked about it, and they have their kids that are grown. And they said, we want to stay in Manchester. We want to sell, we want to downsize, but the first question is, where are we going to go? So they keep that house. If we can have those houses on the market and shift that whole broad spectrum of housing from affordable all the way through 55 plus, that's going to help this. We've started in Manchester. We have 2,000 units, and it is a start, but we're doing it. The number we need, I think, in 10 years is 30,000 around the state, and a lot of what you see from the state is looking at the zoning all across what we can do. I was proud to be part of that in the state senate as well, is starting the, I can't even think of the name, it's terrible, the Housing Development Board. Developers can go and challenge towns that are restricting development. I'll come up with the name later, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
So let me move this forward to the conversation about how to get there. And I think Jay mentioned it before, so Mr. Kavanaugh, I'll start with you. This idea of like cutting red tape, reducing bureaucracy, dealing with fewer regulations in order to be more efficient in the city. I think from a chamber's perspective, if we hear anything around the table at the board of directors meetings that we have, we do get that sense of frustration from time to time that, hey, we want to do this. We can't seem to get through the bureaucracy to get it done, at least in an efficient method. So as a part of these plans and these ideas, how do we cut the red tape and make the process a little bit more consumer friendly?
I hear that all the time too. Two of my brother-in-laws are contractors. They build, you know, and they hear the frustration of working with Manchester. And the planning office in Manchester, I don't want to dump on them because they do a phenomenal job. But you look at things that we've added a home inspector that's going to speed up that process. One of the dealerships we had move in, and granted it was through COVID, so it took 8 months to start. That can't happen. We have to walk people through the process. We have to work with the economic development, the planning, and builders. How do you come in here and work together? You build it together because we don't want to be restrictive here. We want them to be safe, and we want them to be up to code, and that's what we're going to make sure that happens. But we can work together to bridge that gap of going from really getting the approval to the shovel in the ground, and then the certificate of occupancy.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rouet, what's your approach for this?
So this to me is leadership 101. So I'm in the military. My commanding officer comes to me, he gives me an end state, and then I have to work backwards from there, come up with key tasks to get something accomplished. We can develop a similar plan on something like this. To me, it's a bottom-up approach. So you meet with all of the developers within the city. You meet with all of the relevant department heads in the city that have oversight over this. And you put everybody in a room, and you start to pull apart, okay, here are the things that we're going through, here are the things that we're experiencing, what can be done on these? And then you start with measurable, bite-sized, 90-day, 120-day, 6-month, year-long plans, and then you start to put your shoulder into it. But it can't just be a vision. Anybody can give you a vision for what something should look like. Cutting red tape, we all agree, right? But what is the plan in which to get there? And to me, that starts with working with people like you and then putting some meat on the bones. What does that plan look like? How do we execute it? How do we make it actionable? And how do we get it into fruition?
Let me change gears a little bit. Ted Kitchens is here, as was mentioned before, and helping run our airport, which is doing a really, really good job. One of the things that he's shared with us as I get into the question is that, part of the challenge is not just attracting more flyers to create the demand, but you also have to attract the commercial airlines to come to meet the demand. So it's like, it can almost be like a circular chicken and the egg kind of an argument of, we need more people for the demand, we need more flights to get to the demand. So with that said, knowing that it's such an important hub and a bit of a crown jewel for our infrastructure and transportation for New Hampshire, but it's in our backyard, what can be done to greater enhance and bring in the kind of help that Ted might need help at the airport?
Sure. Well, so Ted is a gem, and I've had the pleasure of meeting with him a couple times, and still the best thing I've done on the campaign thus far is going to see the runway, the new one that is going in there. Still the coolest thing I've done thus far on the campaign. I think a big part of this is an education process. So when we're talking with people about, who are choosing to go to Logan or TF Green or someplace else, instead of coming to Manchester, part of that is a failure of education and communication and messaging, because you can get cheaper flights, you can get better connections coming out of Manchester. It just takes that planning process on the individual's part to go far enough ahead of time to make that happen. So I think that's where, again, the mayor, I got the cheerleader line on this one. The mayor can be a cheerleader on this and talk about this and expound on the virtues and the values of going through Manchester as opposed to traveling. Because look, it makes economic sense, it makes time sense, it adds at least 2 legs to your trip because you got to drive somewhere else, then you got to fly, then you got to drive back. And Manchester is it's so easy, quick, efficient. It's one of the greatest things that we have here in the city of Manchester.
So it's the same question to you, Mr. Kavanaugh, and I'll add to it because I was actually paying attention to your presentation at the chamber, that he said that if you could just get 1 in 10 booked flights from the people in our sort of geographic region to pick Manchester instead of Boston, it would make an enormous difference to the demand numbers. 1 in 10, a 10% increase. How do we get there?
And Ted, I hate using names, but you've done a great job there, right? And how do we talk about that? We've talked about the prime cargo unit that was brought in to help lower the cost for other airlines that are coming in, which is going to lower the price of tickets. And you look at the average price of tickets across many areas across the country, it's cheaper out of Manchester. Of course, we all know the ease is so much better out of Manchester than Boston, but we can do it here. And you look at the area that the Manchester Waterworks covers. If all those people were taking the flights out of Manchester, we'd be in great shape, right, Ted? But you look at the economic engine that I talked about before that the airport is. When they want to talk to the airport director in Manchester about development in Concord, that says something. Or about the races we're going to have in Loudon. That's because they're going to be flying into Manchester. And that's how we do it. And how do we do that? We promote ourselves. We promote it. We have a marketing team that's going to be doing that, get our economic development team on board with the added staff that's going to make it a lot better to work in conjunction. Because you can't talk about economic development if you're not talking about the Manchester Airport.
Let's talk public education for a minute. Our superintendent, Dr. Jen Gillis, is here and joining us and listening in at the back of the room. And a couple of questions about public education. And Mr. Kavanaugh, I'll start with you. Let's just start at a high level. How do you envision the role of the mayor in a relationship with our public school district in Manchester? What kind of relationship, what kind of partnership do you envision having with the superintendent and the schools?
Well, first of all, like I said, I graduated from public education in Manchester. Our three kids did. And again, you have to work. As a state senator, I'm going to bring it up again. We bipartisanly work for the largest education funding in New Hampshire history. And as a mayor in Manchester, I'll use those relationships in Concord to get that, make that a thing of the past, because we want more. And that's going to come from the state level and the funding of that. Superintendent Gillis does a great job. We have so many friends that are teachers, and the biggest asset we have in the school district is our superintendent. And I mean that, because I deal with those teachers. I talk to them daily. Again, when we work together is when we strive. We've worked on the curriculum, and I think we have to be adaptive on that, whatever's working and what we can change to help kids learn, and class sizes. We reduced that. There's still more work to do. It's just like coaching. You know, you set goals. You set a goal. We win 2 games one year. The next year you want 4 to 5. You keep those goals moving forward, and you work together as a team to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Rouet, what's your vision as mayor for what kind of relationship
Well,
you
with
have?
the mayor as the head of the school board, I think that there is no more critical relationship than one with the mayor and the superintendent and the principals as well, former Mayor Bombanes in the audience. But I think that relationship is critical. I mean, every study will tell you that a strong public school system equates to a strong city. And if there is a silver bullet to, I think, some of the challenges that we face here in the city, whether it's addiction or mental health, it starts within our schools. So having a strong public school system is essential. It also, for the business community, as we've already discussed a little bit, like with the Army grant coming in, you have those 7,000 direct jobs, 37,000 indirect jobs that are coming in. They're going to be looking at our test scores. They're going to be looking at our proficiency scores and how strong our public education system is when they're choosing where they want to live, if they want to live in Manchester or in some of the surrounding communities. So our public education system is critical here, and as mayor, I can't think of a stronger relationship needed than one between the mayor and the superintendent.
Follow-up question, something that's happening right now in front of the Board of Mayoral Aldermen and the school board. It's something that the chamber has now supported, and we're following closely, and that's the long-range facilities plan, that conversation about the capital investment project. What's your take on that plan, and what do you think about it?
Sure. So I understand again the why. I'm a little bit more hesitant to see what the how is on this and how we are going to pay for this in the long term. When you're looking at numbers like $300 million plus for that first tranche, and then we have the additional high school that's going to be factored into that as well, I really am concerned with the long-term obligations of those costs. Are there cheaper alternatives with more renovations as opposed to complete new reconstruction? I mean, certainly we can all agree that, you know, schools that are dilapidated or falling down or provide safety concerns for children or for teachers, that can never exist. But I would want to be read more into and see what those long-term funding plans are and lines of funding for it before I would commit to supporting a plan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, your take on the long-range facilities plan that's happening right now?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see what we can do better in the city. You know, we talk about housing, we talk about attracting young families. We have to invest in our education system in Manchester. You can't be afraid of that. Nashua is building, I think, 3 schools now, and so why can't we do that in Manchester? But you have to do that at an aspect of we get our tax bill twice a year, and we pay that. We have to respect where the money is coming from the school district, and that's what I'll do as mayor. Can we do better? We have to look at that. We can't look at a school system where the average age of the schools are 75 years. You know, we have to do things different. And I as well tour the MCC. It's phenomenal. And like they say, kids are learning different. We're teaching different. But I think it's going to be tough in Manchester to sell that when the average age of schools is 75. I'm not going to take it away from the voters or the people of Manchester, but it's something we have to look at. And again, so much of that is an investment. If we want to bring people, and if I want my grandkids here, we've got to invest in them.
Philosophically, partnerships may matter in conversations like this. So I know Manchester Proud is one of the examples of a sort of a private partnership with folks from the community and businesses that are working to try to support the school system in some way, shape, or form. Do you, as mayor, envision being able to explore and expand partnerships like that to be able to achieve the kinds of things we're talking about? What does it look like if you do?
It's as broad as you can see, I think, because I think if someone brings an idea, you have to explore it. If it works, you have to amplify it. If it doesn't work, you have to be able to shift. That's tough sometimes in government, but I think we can do it. And I think it shows we can do it with Manchester Proud. It's been a phenomenal group of elected leaders, business leaders, and education leaders. And we can do it. We can all come together. Again, I'm so proud of that. We talk about education, and someone asked me, what's your favorite high school? I said, well, I graduated from Memorial, where I was Mr. Memorial. I got to give that prompt. I coached football at West High School for 6 years, and my 3 kids went to Central. They graduated from Central, and our youngest son went to Manchester School District, Manchester School of Technology. And it's, I love them all. And I'm not going to pick one over the other.
Thank you. So do you, and I use Manchester Proud as an example because it's relevant to the school conversation, but do you see opportunities to try to figure out partnerships like that?
I see opportunities to work with anybody who has a good idea on how to better educate our children, and work with our parents, and work with our teachers, work with our entire community. Because again, like I said in my previous answer, there's nothing more critical to the long-term health of a city than the education of our children, for economic reasons, for just the setting up the child for success later on in life. If somebody has a good idea and they're bringing it to the table, I would be willing to listen to and talk with and work with anybody to accomplish that goal.
Let's talk workforce development for a minute. There are a few of our bright and shining stars that I see towards the back of the room that are part of the Manchester Young Professionals Network, and obviously recruiting and retaining young people is a huge priority, whether it's through the public schools and the workforce development pipeline, through Manchester Community College and what Brian Bignell is doing at MCC. What do we do to attract and retain the young people so that we are in a good shape for an investment into the future?
Sure. So this again is a huge, comprehensive approach, and I think a variety of things. One, you have to have an inviting community filled with culture and arts, safe, clean, inviting streets, addressing the homeless crisis, improving our public safety. But it also includes, like, I had a terrific tour with Brian at Manchester Community College, and I was blown away by his working collaborations with a lot of the businesses that are coming into, or existing businesses and businesses that may look to come into the city, and how they were fashioning and molding the students there for the jobs that are going to be available in the future. That is essential. And as mayor, fostering those kinds of relationships. So there's the education, there's the culture and arts scene in the downtown, there's ensuring that we have public safety and a fix to the homeless crisis, and workforce, and then of course affordable housing. And to attract and retain somebody, of course, it's not going to take a $2,500 or $3,000 a month rent. That's going to be difficult for anybody to meet. So increasing supply to lower costs. And
thank you. And I agree. Brian Bignell gives a fantastic MCC tour if you ever have a chance to. But Kevin, your take on how we recruit and retain our younger, bright stars and the leaders of tomorrow to stay here in Manch.
Well, I think we have one here with us today. But my daughter graduated from college this year. My niece graduated from Providence College this year. And you hear the conversations with them and a lot of their friends, and they talk about, what are we going to do? Where are we going to live? And a lot of them talk about Boston or Manchester. And how do we win that? First of all, I agree, housing. We've talked about that. That's the obvious, right? But what do we talk about what's going to attract people? A vibrant downtown. Look at the businesses that have opened downtown in the last 10 days already, and the success they're having. Having a river walk. You can see what Lawrence has done, and having a beautiful river walk on Arms Park, where you can have a footbridge going over the west side so you can enjoy that park, and maybe a summer concert series where we can work together and keep people here, keep them coming here. But there's a lot to it too, and it's just, we have to show them that. And one, I think we have to talk about is rail service. You have to have it accessible, I think I would like to see it from Concord right down through Manchester to Boston. And I led the effort in the Senate again to get that, just the funding for the investment in it to see if it's viable. And we have to look at that. We have to do it because I think one of those great things is having rail in Manchester.
Before I go to the next question, your take on commuter rail, just as a point of maybe contrast.
sure. So I think, again, this is kind of what I said before about a different issue, but I understand the why. I've talked to a lot of different people within the community who are in favor of it, but again, the how is concerning to me. When every projection that they do on the cost of this, it continues to increase. So now it stands at about $800 million, and the obligated costs annually for Manchester would be $17 or $18 million. You see projects elsewhere that ridership projections don't live up to what they actually are in reality. So my concern is going to be for the taxpayer of Manchester that this is something we're going to spend money on that's not going to have ROI. So I understand the why. I would like to see the plan on the how, and how do we get there without increasing costs and taxes on the city of Manchester.
Let me ask a state question question then off the heels of that, and I'll start with you, Mr. Rouet. So the why and the how on commuter rail, the why and the how on school construction, which does at least partially, allegedly, rely on some state funds. The relationship between Manchester and the state as it pertains to everything from homelessness, which is not necessarily a Manchester problem, to schools and commuter rail. Can we improve that relationship, and does the state owe Manchester some funds and some support here that maybe it hasn't been able to do?
So I got this question in my first close-up interview, and I think the problem with politics today is I think people view it through the prism of what we see on TV, like it's the West Wing or Veep or some other TV show where you have to like throw out a nasty press release or you have to work through convoluted back doors. The relationship between the mayor and the governor is essential. And to have a good working relationship, a good professional working relationship is essential to the city of Manchester. And we're the state's largest city. It's essential that Manchester does well, and that relationship is critical. So if it were me, I mean, I could certainly work with whomever it is, whether it's Mayor Craig, if she ascends, or anybody other of the challengers. But you would have to have a good working relationship where you can pick up the phone if there are concerns. I mean, that to me is the ideal working relationship, not sending a press release or holding a press conference and trying to be negative all the time. I think it's essential that you pick up the phone, say, here's what we're dealing with here, here's where I could use your help, here's what we need to accomplish, let's get it done.
Thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, do you think the state can be kicking in to help more with some of the challenges facing Manchester, seeing as how maybe they're not just Manchester problems?
Absolutely. When I was on the Transportation Committee as a state senator, that issue came towards us. It wasn't to approve rail. It was the federal money just to research it, see if it was going to be worthwhile in this state. It was voted down. There's no reason we can't get a solid plan to see if it's worth doing. If it is, let's do it. If it's not, then we don't. But I led that effort too. There was 200 business owners that signed on to that to get that done. We couldn't get it out of committee. We have to work together. Mayor Craig and I have known each other for long, since we were 12 or 13, you know, and it's just we work well together, and I'm proud to have her endorsement. And I agree. I don't think anything gets done in the largest city of any state without having a great relationship with the governor. And we need that. I'll stand by my record in the state center or alderman about working with people. We may disagree on issues, and I hate that divisiveness of national politics. I mean, just for Scott to say today that we're sitting together doesn't mean you can't like each other, and that's what I want. We can have difference of opinions, and how do we get there might be a different way, but we have to get to the point of what's a good relationship and what's working for the state as well as the city.
I want to go back to the workforce development and recruitment conversation for just a second as a specific aside, childcare. I think childcare access and affordability is a huge challenge, not just in Manchester, but for the surrounding communities, but it's a big deal. What do we do?
Absolutely. We look at everywhere you look, from small businesses to the employer as a city or the employer as a state, the vacant positions we have. As the head of HR for the Committee for Manchester, I was pushing hard to get a compensation study, which we're going through right now. How do we attract people? By doing that. Do we shrink? Does that mean we shrink a step progression of 13 years to 6? I don't know, but that's what that study will tell us. One of the things we talk about paving roads. And you look at DPW, it's down by 30% of employees. They're in the same boat we are. We can't hire people. But what we can do, can we hire, this is exactly what I want to talk about, is can we hire 10 people to open a city daycare center? Absorb some of that cost and have city residents or city employees come in and use that daycare. How many people are staying home with their kids and they want to work, but our niece is paying $30,000 in daycare for one child. It's just incredible. We've got to look at that and see what we can do to lower those costs, but bring people into the workforce and have a good daycare for their kids. I'd stay home too if there wasn't a good daycare for my kids, and we can open some in the city.
Mr. Rouet?
Yeah, I was in a position to hire a woman at one point, and she was making $30,000 a year in the job that she was currently in. She had one child. All of that money was going directly into her child care. So it was just an immediate pass-through to the kindergarten that the kid was, that her child was at. So certainly, I mean, I know that the state has looked at doing this, or I know the state has looked at a number of different proposals on this. I know there are a number of private employers that offer it. While we have a tightened job market, I know some employers are now offering these kinds of benefits to attract employees. But I'd be happy to look at any kind of proposal that could come before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on this.
I'd like to talk for a few minutes, and I know we have just a few minutes left. I want to hit infrastructure and taxes as two other topics. An umbrella question about infrastructure, what your priorities might be. But with Brian here from MCC, I know the conversation about DOT and the exit plans for exit 6 and 7. You're talking about the Amskeg traffic circle, and you're talking about exit 7, which is right onto Front Street, which is to the doorstep of MCC. DOT has a plan to revitalize all that, make it safer, make it easier, but it could be an enhanced access point, something important for MCC in the northern part of the city. But they're talking about a delay of 10 years for doing it. Your take?
Yeah, so this is where I think the mayor can use the power of the bully pulpit to try and effect change. I mean, we've talked about a number of issues today that I think the mayor can play a really strong advocacy role on behalf of the city, and this is another in a long line of those. Infrastructure is one of those non-sexy issues that is essential to a moving city, especially if we're looking to grow in the next 10 to 20 years, making sure that we have good infrastructure to move commerce, to move residents, to get to different places, to open up different places in our city. We heard about it at Riverwoods last week, people concerned about not being able to get out of Riverwoods if there was a snowstorm or commuter or having the bus routes extended to there. These kinds of things are essential and absolutely something that the mayor should have a finger on the pulse on. And whatever we could do from an advocacy standpoint to impress upon the state the importance of this, I'd be all in favor of.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, your take on exit 6 and 7 and infrastructure investment.
You know, when I first went to the Senate in 2017, the plan was there. We had a presentation at Parkside School, and it was great. It was phenomenal, but you do that to have that public opinion of what it's going to do. One of the businesses was going to have to be taken by eminent domain because it was 4 feet of that design. I worked with the director to change that, and that would have solved that problem, working with government and business leaders to do that. We can do that. We talked about this Tuesday night. I am blown away that funding, it's the most dangerous intersection in the state. It has to be fixed. We can't allow that to happen. We're sending a letter to have the developer or the engineer talk to the board, but I can tell you right now, that's going to go to the executive council. There's someone from the executive council that lives in Manchester. We should not allow that funding to go out for 10 years, and we have to call people out on that, and we have to work together. I mean, sometimes you do have to knock heads, and I think this is it, because it's such an incredibly traveled part of the state and the most dangerous that we have to fix. And the design that's there is phenomenal. It'd be great to do.
Final topical question before we get to closings, taxes. A lot of families, a lot of businesses live on a very narrow margin. So affordability of the projects that you're pitching versus what the tax rate looks like, it's always a conversation. We're a tax cap city. Your take on the tax cap and any message you would want for folks to know about your take on taxes.
Who here likes taxes, right? No, but I mean, as a mayor, I'll always present a budget that's below the tax cap. When I knock doors, people talk about the services they get, the roads being paved, potholes being fixed, curbing, everything we can, trash pickup, what we all want from living in a city. But on the other side, like I talked about, we get our tax bill too. We have to know what we're looking at, and we have to respect, especially now with the inflation. You know, that money is coming out of working families' pockets, and we have to respect that. Whatever we're doing, we have to provide the services for the people that are here. And I mean, I talked about the Manchester Water Works. They're providing water to 11 different communities, 165,000 people are in this area. It's things we can do, but we always have to respect where that money is coming from. It's what I'll do to watch that. We're all on a budget, you know, and it's just we've got to respect where that money is coming from, but we have to make use of the services and provide the services that people want in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Away?
Yeah, so the city of Manchester voted in the tax cap, and I think that this is essential to reining in the spending here in the city. And, you know, over the last 5-6 years, we've seen significant tax increases, and we've seen repeated tax cap overrides. And I think that's an affront to the citizens that we have here in the city of Manchester. Also, something that we've not really talked about yet is the next mayor is going to have a fiscal tax cliff on their hands. We've been spending, we've received millions of dollars in federal funding over the course of ARPA throughout COVID, and we've hired a lot of long-term positions and spent a lot of money on long-term obligated costs with one-time funds. So that next mayor is going to have a choice to make. Are we going to blow through the tax cap in order to continue on that spending trend, or are we going to make some really difficult, fiscally responsible decisions? So that's the choice, and I'm going to tell you where I will land. I will make sure that everything that we are doing is fiscally responsible, that we are looking for zero-based budgeting, that we're always going to have accountability, and data is going to drive our decision-making, but I will not override the tax cap.
Thank you both for answering the questions. I had at least 3 of you in the audience threaten physical harm if I didn't keep this to inside of an hour. So we're going to move to closing statements. And Mr. Kavanaugh, you have the first 2-minute closing.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Jay, and all of you for being here, really. It's always been a pleasure. I know we're on a series now. We're taking the show on the road, right? But it's just, I mean, I love these forums, and it's great to have our ideas out to people. I'm here because I was born and raised here. This is my hometown. And I want it to succeed, and I'll do everything I do, just like I have as 8 years as an alderman and 6 years as a state senator. Every time I make a decision on that, I'm looking, is it going to help Manchester? Is it going to make it succeed in the future? And I'll do that as mayor. And we have to do that together. I've talked about it, and I'll keep on talking about it as a coach. You bring kids together. You know, is my job working for a union, as contracts. We tried to build on contracts, and how do we do that? I'm proud of what I've done for the 13 contracts we settled in September of this year. July, I'm sorry. We had 13 contracts. We were 8 months overdue. The mayor and the board put me on the negotiating team that we settled those contracts in 13 weeks. That helps the taxpayer, and it helps the employees that were working every day through the pandemic. And we can do that. We can do that together. And I'm just so very proud to have Manchester as my hometown, and I just want it to succeed. And I want you all to know, as mayor, again, every decision I make will to improve Manchester.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rouet, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you again, Scott, for moderating this. Kevin, again, for being here, and for all of you for taking the time out of your day as well. It's incredibly important to be civically engaged, and I appreciate you being here. You know, we started the campaign in February 22nd, and I had an idea about the kinds of things I wanted to talk about and how I wanted to present it. I always wanted to be positive. I always wanted to be solutions-based, and we immediately started knocking on doors. So I was out there in the snow on February 24th, that first weekend, and it was amazing to me that the things that I wanted to talk about so closely aligned with how Manchester is feeling. We all love our city. We're deeply dedicated to it. We're devoted to it. We want to be here. We want to live here. We want to work here. We want to be here in, you know, the coming years and decades. But we do have some serious challenges, and I think we need to break with some of the status quo that we've been experiencing here in the city and provide some new solutions and new leadership, particularly on the greatest and most pressing challenges that we have here in the city, particularly with respect to homelessness, the crisis that we have there, and improving our public safety. But that is only going to happen when we all work together. And that's why we've been trying and working to build a coalition that can not only win, but more importantly, most importantly, govern when we get into office. So again, I really appreciate you all being here, very excited. Please remember to go out and vote on November 7th, and I'd be honored to have your support.
Gentlemen, thank you. Many thanks to our sponsors, Bellwether Community Credit Union, Eversource, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and of course our host, the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. And gentlemen, I think this one could have been sponsored by the Hallmark Channel, as friendly as this was. This is the easiest exchange I've ever done.
You can disagree without being disagreeable.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Kevin's been a great dance partner.
So many deep thanks to Kevin Kavanaugh and
Cheerleader,
Jay
how about
Rouet.
that? Okay.
Best of luck to both of you.
Not
Don't
literally.
forget to vote.
Not literally.
All right, that's it, everybody. Have a wonderful night. You can actually leave.